Alright, where to start? Haven't been working on this thing too much lately, been doing other stuff. But I have a lot gathered up and I think ready to make another jump. Biggest thing is I've been talking to the ISIS people, Jay Harris, and he's got me squared away on a bunch of stuff on what I need to do. And I talked to him yesterday, and he sent me some files that I need to download into the master cells and power cells, which basically assign, what the inputs are going to be, whether it's going to be through the inputs of the master cell. You can assign, a different function, for those inputs, which will send a signal, to a certain location at a certain wire. The location being the different power cells, one up front, one in the back. So there's been quite a few guys with the GTMs already put this ISIS system in there, so they've already kind of developed a pretty good roadmap for what needs to be done on these cars. So he sent me that file, and everybody's cars are going to be a little bit different, so I'll have a few changes and I'll explain what that is to Jay. He'll send me an updated file, and then it'll be good to go. Same thing with the touch screen. You can add or remove and label different buttons, assign different functions which apply to your car and the things you have in it. Like maybe you want a light in the front area under the bonnet. Maybe you want a button for interior lights. Maybe you want a button for the light back here. And you just put that in the lighting section page, within the touch screen. And then also, I have the in reserve, they call it. Basically, it's a solenoid. Shuts the power off once the voltage gets down to a certain spot. And then when you come back to your car, you actually have enough voltage left to open up your doors with your door poppers, and enough voltage to crank the motor over and start the car. And so I'm going to put that in. That's what some of this stuff is. There's a cool little button right there which turns the power back on, and then you hit your key fob, which they call the in-link, and that hooks into the master cell. Lots of different buttons on that thing, different pages. You can assign different functions to the different positions on the key fob. Roll the windows up and down, turn the fan on, pop the doors open. Anything you want. And it has some type of security system built into it also. Let's see what else is going on. I don't know. There's what the roadmap looks like. Factory 5 GTM with in reserve, which is the battery saver. Version 10.36, and this also has the vintage air. So the vintage air will work, and it also has the touch screen in it. So hopefully a lot of that stuff will come alive and be operable once I download that hex file in there. And this version here pretty much has everything that I need. There's a couple weird things though. Like a lot of GTMs have the ECU in the back. Mine happens to be in the front. You know, I like it up there, but it was by accident because the custom harness, you know, that's the way the guy made it. So, you know, like the ignition and the starter wires were in the rear location, you know, and I want mine up front. So as it turned out, you know, the only thing I'd be using the rear box for would be the lights back here. Everything else would go off the front. There's not enough connections on the one to do everything up here. So I'm going to relocate that rear box. I'm going to put it up here. Everything's going to be crammed up here now. And I'll just run both boxes from up here. So any assignments to box 1, box 2 that may have been different with my car versus what's on that paper isn't going to matter, because they're going to both essentially be from one location anyway. So that'll work well, and there'll be provisions on there where I can add a couple different things that I want, like some accessory fans, and some accessory power, you know, which I may label, you know, like entertainment, like the stereo or whatever. Still waiting on a couple of these mega fuses from ISIS. I'm going to stack up a couple more right there. I'll have a couple solenoids up here, one for the starter, one for the in reserve. I'm going to get rid of a bunch of wires by moving that ISIS. All of these will be gone. You know, and then I'll just have a few wires going back there for the lights. So, let's see, what else do I got going? Been thinking about the intake and different options. Still haven't found a solution. What I want to do yet. I'm going to move this key. I'm going to put this in a different spot. Tidy that up better. Wiring is, you know, it kind of uglies up the situation, so once I get the loom on there, it'll kind of clean everything up again, and hopefully I can do it to where, you know, it's not a mess, so should be okay. Still got a lot to figure out, but I got a lot more under control. Found a new spot for that power cell. And mount it right back there. And then I got some covering over the wires for heat. I did all the wires that are going to go by the motor. You know, like the loom that goes down in there by the headers on both sides, and the brake lines that go right by the headers. Got all that stuff wrapped for heat, and it looks pretty good right there, kind of symmetrical. with the other side. And I'm getting the power hooked up to the solenoids up front here. And I need to pick some stuff up because I'm tripping over everything. Alrighty. Here's what we got so far, and this will be a good documentation for myself if I ever want to go back and try and remember what I did. This came out pretty good. Nice and tight in there. Got the power going into a mega fuse, branching off to these solenoids, and then also this runs into my engine harness, and that runs into that key that I have set up, so I can bypass all the systems, you know, the touchscreen if that fails, and then the ISIS if that fails. So I can whip out my key, stick it in the hole, fire up the motor, and drive it home, and then fix whatever's wrong later. So I got power, and then the alternator runs in there through that also, undisturbed by any of the solenoids or anything. And I'm going to add a couple more of these mega fuses right here. Finish that off. And then as far as my solenoids, one of those, this one runs the wire down to the starter, and then this wire here is the one that activates the solenoid. And then remember, I got my starter jumped over in the back there, so when that big wire gets power, it's jumped over to the solenoid on the starter and turns it over. So that works pretty good. And then this one, the power is bridged off to this one. That's the solenoid that is the in reserve, which it runs off the ISIS, and when the power drops down below, you know, like 12 volts for 30 minutes, I don't remember the specs on that, that kicks the solenoid. So you can walk away from your car if the battery drops down, kicks the solenoid, then you walk back to your car and you got power by flipping a switch. You know, and I'm going to have door poppers and that, so that'll ensure when I get back I don't have to figure out how to get inside my car. So that's going to be cool. And then that will give power to the chassis, you know, the chassis harness, which will be, you know, the ISIS basically, and whatever stereo and radio I run. So right now I've got the battery hooked up. I got my terminals on there. Everything's plugged in, everything's live. And right now, you know, like the ISIS is off, so, you know, I can hit my key, start the car. Or I could hit the switch, which I don't have mounted anywhere yet. Now that just turned on the power to the chassis, the ISIS, the touch screen, everything else. I just did an update on the master and power cells, and after the update my touch screen don't work, which I'm not blaming Jay. I was rushing him Friday before the holiday. He spit me out a hex file, and it's modeled after that GTM, and I do believe, you know, all the inputs and everything are what's on that paper, so I'm going to go ahead and keep routing everything, minus the fact that the touchscreen don't work. And then Tuesday we'll get back a hold of Jay and he'll send me a new file and we'll get that fixed. So yeah, I'm going to get everything routed that I can without the touchscreen working. I got some of the wires tucked up for the master cell. And the first thing I've hooked up so far, I've spliced into 4 of the wires on this B connector, which do run the touchscreen, because before it was plugged in with this. And I will be using some inputs off that B connector as well as the A connector, so we've got those spliced in there. And then from there I'm going to probably just start at the top of the list of this road map and just start routing off what I can, wiring up what I can, and whatever's left we'll start tackling on Tuesday. Man, that motor looks sweet in there. It's going to be pretty cool to have a motor mounted in your back seat. Alright, got all the wires running in the direction they belong. Everything up here is lights, horn. You know, you got road lights, high beam, low beam, horn, right signal, left signal, park lights. So those will all get hooked up front, and in the back same thing. Tail lights, signal lights, brake lights, and the power cells. You know, each of those connections has a ground that will be hooked up. And kind of started doing the inputs for the steering column. And these, you know, this side will do the headlights, the brights, you know, turn signals. And this one also has the horn in it. This little piece right there grounds out on the back of this plate, which grounds out on the wheel, which grounds out to the horn switch. And that runs off of ground. So, you know, all these inputs here are running to that master cell. I got it looped around, and we'll connect that together in here somewhere. But each one of those is for, you know, like a right turn signal, low beam, horn, you know. And then you got to find what each one of these wires, which part of that it controls, you know, and then hook them together. And so this is pretty cool, because, you know, I got to retain when you pull this forward, flashes your brights. And this one has self-canceling. You know, it's built into the ISIS. It's a function you assign a self-canceling turn signal, so if you just bump it, you know, it'll flash for a few times and go off by itself. And like all the hazards and the road lights, that'll all be a button run off of the touchscreen rather than off the column. So a lot of things are ran by this little deal, and those are all the wires. It all works. So I'll put that in, you know, and wire that in with some connections. I'll probably use some weather pack connections, hook that together, make it to where the switch is serviceable. And then I got to do the other side of the column, which is going to be the windshield wipers, and it's going to be just a basic low speed. And then I'll pick one of these switches to run the squirter. And that probably will not run through the ISIS. That'll just be a hot wire running the wiper, and then the hot wire getting triggered into the washer bottle. So I'll get that going next, and that should be it for the column. And I still have the telescoping wheel to hook up, and I have the option of running that with the in motion, which is the motor controller part of the ISIS, or because that's just a simple, push the button, the motor runs, and that thing either goes in and out. And it's got a switch on the side of the column. Or if I had enough inputs and outputs, I could wire that up through the ISIS, I'm sure. But that'll be another thing where I probably just add power to it and run it separate of the ISIS with the switch. And once I get this column squared away, I have to stop and think, but I think that's pretty much about all the inputs I'll have. I'll have an input off the door. On the door handle, I'll hook up a micro switch, so when you're inside the car, pull the door handle, it'll trigger the solenoid. So that'll be an input. I've got all the wires ran pretty much where they need to go. Like for the windows. And I've got a couple wires ran ready right here for accessory fans. I'm going to put a couple of fans in the tunnel or something, in the engine compartment. To turn that on and off to keep that vented. And then I've got an extra wire here that I'm still able to use, controlled with some input. So that's hanging there waiting and ready. Still got to wire up the fuel pump, door popper, and can't remember what that other wire's for at the moment. Everything's working in the column. Got brights, park lights, headlights, bright, low beam, and wipers are working, squirters are working. And then I hooked up this to the in motion, which is the motor controller. And so I hooked up to the inputs for that, my telescoping wheel. And the horn, so everything's functional on the column. Other than that, there's not going to be much inputs except for the door handles, which I have the... Yeah, the next thing I'll do is get the environment hooked up, which will be, the AC, getting the switch hooked up for the vacuum switch, which works the heater valve, and the AC compressor, and the fans, the fan override, which I'll be able to, access through the screen or my key fob. What else I gotta do? And then the gauges. Getting close.